I feel like there's a lot of videos out there about the iPad mini 7 calling it the best iPad ever, but for who? I think that this is a unicorn in the tech space because people like us care, but your average Joe? People just want bigger screens. I mean, people are even out there buying their toddlers iPad Pros so they can watch Cocomelon on an OLED display. Like, who is the mini even for? Now, I've seen people say that this is the most iPadiest iPad, whatever that means. And it seems like every video I click on about this thing, another person's life is miraculously being changed by it. By this little 8.3-inch doohickey, it doesn't even have ProMotion. Okay, jokes aside, this is the new iPad mini 7. And as much as I hate to admit it, I have actually been impressed. Here's the thing though. I want to make this review centered around what I do as a content creator and explain how the new iPad minis kind of changed my workflow. I'll show you how I use this as a camera monitor, how I use it for keeping up with my tasks, my calendar, my image editing workflow, and a couple of other cool things along the way. Before we get into it though, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. I just want to say thank you so much for the support that you've been showing me. We're almost at 50,000 subscribers, so if you can show some love by clicking the button down below, it would really mean a lot. Okay, so the other day I was looking at getting a monitor for my camera, and if you know anything about camera tech and equipment, it's insanely expensive. I came across the Shinobi 2 from Atomos. It's 5.2 inches, it's 1080p. It looked promising. It's basic, but it's good enough for now. I'm not a professional filmmaker or anything. Sorry, it's $500? And wait, it doesn't even come with the battery or the mount? By the time I end up getting this monitor kitted out, I'm gonna be spending close to 700 Canadian dollars. That's until I had this insane idea. The iPad mini here in Canada is $679.99. Now, it's not a field monitor by any means, but it's small enough to be mounted. I can use it wired or wireless. It's touchscreen, has great battery life, and it is bright enough to be seen outdoors. So I pulled the trigger. I got the iPad mini, and I'm just gonna say it, this is the best idea that I've ever had. Let me tell you a little bit more about the iPad though before I ramble on about how I specifically use this thing. The new iPad mini 7 starts at 128 gigs base storage configuration, which is nice. It's not ideal, but it is much better than the 64 gigabytes on the Mini 6. It's very light at 293 grams, has USB-C, and Apple's A17 Pro SoC borrowed from last year's iPhone 15 Pro Max. Now, its display is 8.3 inches diagonally, it is sharp at 326 ppi, and it does hit a peak of 500 nits brightness. It is also only 60 Hz. Now, if the new iPad mini doesn't sound impressive, it's because on paper it really isn't. I am a little bit disappointed that we couldn't have seen at least an OLED display as a nice spec bump, or maybe even an M-series Apple Silicon SoC, and hell, maybe even slightly thinner bezels to make the display a touch larger at this size. The thing is though, I actually do not care. I think this is my first and only time a 60 Hz device is going to hear that from me here in 2024, but for my use case, it genuinely would be redundant. For those who use the Apple Pencil Pro though, or plan to use the Mini 7 to play games, the added smoothness ProMotion could have brought to the tablet would have been nice. I don't know, maybe Apple will do this with the next iteration if the Mini doesn't somehow get canned like the iPhone Mini, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Anyways though, back to what I was saying, I have been using this to film my B-roll, which has been especially helpful. There's some shots that I do in my car where the camera is mounted to the sunroof and I literally cannot see what I'm doing. But with the iPad, I can leave it on the dash of my car, have a crisp, bright and clear readout of what my camera is seeing, and it just helps me with framing and exposure. Doing this on a phone, sure, it is possible. It's something that I could have been doing this whole time. But I do feel like the Mini is the perfect size for this, not just to be useful, but also convenient. I've tried to do this in the past with the M4 13-inch iPad Pro, and sure, its display destroys the Mini, but it just wasn't realistic. The Mini though, it could easily be chucked into a bag, a pocket, and of course, while I still don't want to damage this thing, to me I do feel safer being a little more rough with this over a $2,000 tablet. There are also mounts that I'm looking into getting which could attach this to the camera, and you can even use a USB-C to HDMI capture device with a monitoring app to get smooth, lag-free full-res readout, but I like the wireless approach because it's convenient. On that note though, I am also looking into using the Mini as a teleprompter, one of those teleprompters that have a mirror and reflect off of a tablet beneath it. I think the Mini is like the perfect size. I don't have to spend a crap ton on a teleprompter, and it's also something that I'll just always have around, which will be perfect for when the new studio is finished. Now, sure, it's not the M2 or M4, and it's not even the latest A18 Pro. That being said, the A17 Pro is still very capable. One of the apps that I use on a regular basis is Lightroom Mobile, and sure, it runs perfectly fine on my Pixel or on my iPhone, but I have always enjoyed the experience on the larger M4 iPad Pro since it was just easier to make out the edits on a larger screen. With the Mini though, it's actually been really good, not only in terms of performance when it comes to those heavier edits, generative fill or erase tools and export times, but the display is also easy to work with. I don't have to sit down and be hunched over a large tablet. I can just hold this up like I do with any phone and tap away, but I have a lot more information viewable to me. I could see my image clearly, and despite the subpar display, when it comes to the Liquid Retina LCD inside the iPad Mini, it is actually very accurate, and overall, it is very comfortable to use for applications like Lightroom. And there is also bonus points for being able to airdrop my RAW files from my iPhone to my iPad Mini so I can start editing quickly. However, I am happy that Apple's embraced USB-C, even if it may have been done forcefully, because it's easy to go to and from my iPad or iPhone with an external SSD or SD card. And speaking of SD card, I've actually been using it to import some footage into the iPad for Final Cut and CapCut. This is going to be for sure something that I mess with a lot more, and I'm hoping that I can actually utilize this because being able to just take the Mini around to edit some shorts would actually be kind of nice. Now, the one area in which I would say that I was slightly disappointed in the Mini for was the speakers. They don't sound full, they lack depth, and they're kind of made silly even by the 16 Pro Max. However, for watching media like YouTube videos or Netflix and even playing some games, it's fine. I guess that I'm just so used to using the M4 iPad Pro as a literal room speaker when working, since those are insanely good. And I guess since we're on the topic of disappointing things, I think it would have been nice to see some new shooters on the iPad. Now, don't get me wrong, I've never understood people who actually just go out and use their iPad to take photos and do like street photography and stuff. I don't really care for that. That's not something that I necessarily want. But on the Mini, having better cameras kind of makes more sense. Like, the 12 megapixel wide on the Mini isn't horrible. It could take some decent images, and it can shoot 4K at up to 60 frames per second, which is nice. But if the Mini was closer to something like the 16 Pro Max in terms of image quality, it could have genuinely been a really useful tool, especially as a B cam in a pinch if you're someone that does shoot on mobile. The 12 megapixel ultra wide front camera, on the other hand, it's not great. It is 1080p and it does have center stage, which is nice for FaceTime or meetings since the camera is located at the top in portrait, but it's not the best in low light and it does show a lot of noise very quickly. So this is what front facing video looks like on the iPad Mini 7. Now, it can only do up to HD at 30 frames per second, which obviously isn't that great, but I don't expect people to be using this to do any sort of vlogging or whatever. But let me know in the comments down below what you think about the actual quality of this camera and whether it's something that you'd use other than just for meetings and such. Now, when it comes to the positioning, I am glad that Apple kept it centered in portrait and not in landscape, as I think it makes more sense for the Mini's form factor. Okay, so when it comes to the applications that I use on the Mini, there is quite a handful that I really like. So, Freeform. It's built into iPad OS, but I do use it for vision boards. Currently, I'm building out a studio space, so it's nice to be reminded of what the look I'm trying to achieve is, and having it on a slightly larger display is nice, especially since I carry this with me everywhere I go. For tasks, I use Google Tasks. It syncs up with my iPhone and Pixel, and basically use this as a reference for what my day is going to look like when I wake up in the morning. If I think of anything I need to do the next day, I write it down and I see it in tasks across all of my devices. Doing this regularly has actually helped me out a ton, and it's helped me stay in control of my life because I'm a very chaotic person that doesn't do a lot of organization, and having this on the Mini is kind of perfect. I have this as well as Google Calendars on a widget on the home screen of the Mini so that at a glance I could just see what's going on in my day. And of course there is Lightroom, which I already went over, but yes, I use it to edit all of my raw photos. It's a fantastic app and I use it mostly for leisure, but I honestly couldn't live without it. A couple of other apps that I like though, I use the Newer application for controlling my lights, and the Sonos app is installed for controlling my Move 2 and Arc speakers, and the app that I use for for monitoring my Sony camera is the Monitor Plus app from Sony, which I do find works really well. Now with the Mini though, I've noticed very quickly how convenient it actually is to use this as like a smart home hub, especially when it comes to the things that are in my office, like my lights that I mentioned, because when I'm using it on my phone, I typically change devices quite regularly depending on what's new, and I never have everything set up all the time correctly, so it becomes a pain in the ass. Now, just having one device that's kind of always connected to that stuff is actually really convenient, and it does help a lot, especially in this space. The Mini is also the perfect form factor for reading, whether it's articles about new and interesting tech, browsing aimlessly through my timelines, or even picking up a book. Just kidding. I don't really read books, but if I did, the Mini would be a go-to device for me. It's also very easy and surprisingly comfortable to type on. I don't really have to stretch my thumbs far, which makes responding to messages or emails actually kind of nice when on the go. I will say though that if you do want to pick up an Apple Pencil Pro for the iPad mini, it does open up this device to being used with a lot of different applications. It becomes a sketchbook, a notebook, you're able to have finer controls in apps like Lightroom or Final Cut, and overall, it actually kind of transforms the mini into a productivity machine. I personally don't use an Apple Pencil all that often. To me, it just gets in the way of holding the device, and I also just have terrible handwriting, so I prefer to type notes anyways. And of course, I did try gaming on the Mini, and as expected, it was very good. Warzone Mobile, the most demanding mobile game that I play, ran on this thing like a champ, and because it's not gigantic, it's actually really easy to use with your hands and play comfortably versus plugging in a controller like I did on my M4 iPad. Diablo Immortal was also really fun to mess with, and when it comes to the extensive backlog on the App Store, if you're someone who cares about entertainment and gaming, the Mini is actually a really cool device, especially if you're a busy person and you're always on the go. It would have been nice to see a 120Hz display, especially for gaming, but the thing is, if it's not an OLED screen, it's going to use up a lot of power, and games are just straight up more demanding when running at higher frame rates. So in terms of battery life, it would have suffered. It's not the best gaming experience that you can get on mobile, but I actually do really like it. Now, Apple Intelligence has rolled out and it is available on the Mini 7 now. I messed with it a little bit and it works well. You can now get responses through ChatGPT, which is cool, but as for image playgrounds and so on, I don't think it's available in Canada yet because I just straight up do not have access to it. But to be honest though, and I feel like this is kind of repetitive in this video, I don't care. I don't think that I'm ever going to use it. If I want to use any sort of AI tool, I'm probably just going to use Gemini or ChatGPT to be realistic. I've been using the beta for Apple Intelligence for a little bit on the 16 Pro Max, and I just don't think that it's that great. I know we're far from seeing the full implementation and whatnot, but there are other devices on the market that are already available in its full force. So I think Apple's just behind. Now, look, the Mini, it's not for everyone, and there are still issues, and I would love to see Apple stop being so ignorant and just listen and deliver for once. There is still jelly scrolling, which never really bothered me, but 3 years later, and Apple just decided to ignore this problem in hopes that it would go away on its own. It didn't though. It's not really better. It's still there, and I don't know. I don't get it, man. And the Mini's battery life, it's kind of mediocre. Although that might be confusing, the 15 Pro Max had great battery life, same chip, smaller battery, and so on, but because of the Mini's LCD display, it's much less efficient than OLED, and whilst it does deliver all-day battery life according to Apple, if you use this thing heavily, it will kill it throughout the day. Just using this as a field monitor yesterday for recording some B-roll, I managed to get it down 20% in about an hour. So that's with using Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and having the display constantly running and being connected to my camera. But 20% in an hour, it's not the best. That's about 5 hours of screen on time if I was to use it for this specific niche application. But I mean, it could be better. Now, all of that being said though, the Mini is irreplaceable. At this price point, at this size, for this level of performance, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no competition. And that's why I think that this niche product excels in niche use cases. It's the perfect companion for me in my day-to-day, and I'm excited to keep using this and find other quirky ways in which it can actually be of use to me. If you enjoyed this one and you want to see more videos about the iPad mini in the future, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. If you've watched all the way through, go ahead and drop a pear emoji in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.